Okay, welcome back to the Stay on Your Bike podcast, everybody. Hope you enjoyed last week's episode. This week, I'm really excited to have an incredible bike rider on, a good friend of mine, and somebody that's pretty hard to match in bicycle racing in whatever discipline he's done. So, without further ado, I'd love to welcome on Brian Lopes. How are you, mate?
Hey, Nige, thanks for having me. Hey, thanks for having me and Hershey. Hershey's my co-partner in this interview. So
Brilliant.
very needy dog, very needy.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've been thinking about the things I can talk to you about, and there's just far too many things to talk to you about with your career, how you got into riding, all of the usual stuff. But I think we'll start off with, we'll quickly go through your, you know, early biking years and your BMX career and moving into mountain biking. But there's obviously loads of stuff has changed since you stopped racing, and I'd like to ask your opinions on all that as well, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
anything
but
you want, dude. I'm an open book for you.
Okay, cool. Well, anyway, let's start off. I think you started racing BMX when you was about 4 or 5 years old, didn't you? Is that correct?
It is. Yep.
And so me and you are the same age, very similar age anyway. I think you're but a couple of months older than me. Um, but we both raced BMX as kids. I started a little bit later than you did. But how did you find BMX and get into that then at such an early age? I guess living in California was the best place, to do that.
Yeah, I mean, really, really, it was just my dad. My dad had a friend that had a kid that was a couple years older than I was, and I think I was just always riding my bike around the streets and hitting little jumps and things like that. And he was like, "Oh, my son goes to this track and races. You should bring your kid." And that was really the beginning of it. Yeah, it was 1975. My dad took me to the track, and yeah, that was the start.
Brilliant. And so 1975, that must have been pretty early on in BMX racing, even in California, was it?
Yeah, I believe so. Like sometimes people ask me, specific questions about the 70s and racing, and you know, I was little, right? Like I don't know, I don't remember everything, right? A lot of the memories that I have are basically from my dad's archives of old 8 millimeter film that he had from back then, or old pictures and stuff like that. Um, I think really my most of my memory, I feel like, starts a little bit later, like when I'm like 10 or 11,
Sure.
but the early age is not as easy. It's a long ways, long time ago, bro. You know
Yeah, it is, mate.
that.
And can you remember what your first bike was that you raced BMX on?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can't remember, but the pictures and
Pictures.
stuff have me memories of that, and that was a Schwinn Pixie. Yeah, a
Okay.
little Schwinn Pixie with a banana seat and big high bars. Yeah, my dad has some old film of me at Saddleback Raceway, which was
Wow.
actually, I mean, it's like 30 minutes from where I live now. That's not technically there anymore, but it was a motorcycle track as well as a BMX track. And yeah, like with Rams football helmet on, and I'm like 4.5 years old, so I think I had a gas tank on my bike. Yeah, kind of funny.
Brilliant. I mean, obviously, uh, over in the UK, we got the magazines and we see the old footage of that era. So that's an iconic place where it all kind of started off in California. And then, when did you get your first actual BMX bike, and do you remember what that was?
Yeah, so my first like real race bike was probably when I was 5. So within the first year,
Hmm.
and it was called a R&R.
Okay.
And so I don't really know what happened to that. I think that bike might have got stolen. I'm not 100% sure, but uh, I think super old school people will probably remember that bike, but it wasn't obviously a bike that ever, um, turned into some sort of
Yeah.
bigger brand.
Yeah.
But it was pretty cool, actually. The bike, I remember it also had these bladed forks that were more like a triple crown style of fork,
Oh yeah.
kind of like moto. And I mean, maybe there was some influence from moto, but definitely wasn't like the traditional style single crown style of fork that all BMX bikes are today.
Sure. Cool. And obviously in that in Southern California, there's as well as yourself, there's been so many iconic names in BMX racing that have gone on to do mountain biking and motocross and everything else. Who was the first kind of people that you started racing with and became friends with and that might have, a lot of people will have heard of still?
From I would say the time of like 11-ish, some of the guys that I raced with and remember, well, like, I mean, probably the one that people will know the most, the biggest name out of anybody is McGrath, Jeremy McGrath. He raced BMX obviously back then, and I'm like, I think 2 months older than he is, so we're very close in age, and yeah, uh, he and I raced against each other quite a bit in those early years, like that 11, 12, 13, 14. I think probably somewhere around the age of 14, he was kind of, moving off into the motorcycle world, but he was the biggest one. I think names that maybe a lot of your followers would know are guys like Eric Carter and Mike King and Dave Cullinan. Um, those were all friends of mine and guys that I rode with quite a bit. I didn't necessarily race those guys so much in my earlier years of BMX because they're a little bit older than me.
Yeah.
But once I turned pro, those guys were already pro, and so I was racing those guys in BMX and pro. And then, kind of like one of the earlier guys that really kind of took me under his wing a bit and gave me help and some guidance and support was Toby Henderson,
Hmm.
um, who's, I don't know, probably like 10 years older than me, but he was, when you're 10 and somebody's 20, they seem old.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think those were probably some of the names, Pistol Pete Lonkarovich also.
And obviously, since I've known you, I mean, probably the first time I would have not met you, but being in the same sort of race with you, I think would have been the 85 Worlds in Whistler. Um,
Oh wow.
yeah, I believe you were riding for SE then, is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's cool. I didn't know you were at Whistler that year.
Yeah,
I mean, who would have known, right? If we would have known Whistler would become what it is today back then,
yeah.
imagine. Yeah, it was kind of a crazy track, right? It was a little bit downhill too. Maybe that was our first, experience of downhilling. But I actually, when I think back, even Saddleback was a little bit downhill, and then we actually used to race this track um, in Norco, and it was actually a big downhill. A matter of fact, when I raced it, I think like the 7 and under age group or something like that actually didn't even start all the way at the start gate at the top of the hill because it was like too much downhill for the little kids.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Cool.
But
Yeah, well,
but Brad, did we race each other in Whistler?
do you know what? I've got some photographs from that race, and I can't remember. I'm pretty sure. I don't know if you'll be able to remember, but the motos were mixed like they are now. So you didn't have the same people in each moto, and I think I was in one of your motos because the picture's so small, but there's definitely somebody in. my one of my motos with the SE strip. As per usual, Brian, you would have smoked me, so you probably didn't see me after you came out the gate.
Come
But
on.
how did can you remember how you did at that event?
I know I have that trophy still, because it's a
Awesome.
real unique trophy. It's like a statue carved out of like
Wood.
some sort. No, it wasn't
No?
wood. It was like some sort of stone, some sort of like black stone, and I think there's like a bear on it. Hold
Okay.
on a second. I'm gonna hold on. I'm gonna take you with me
Okay.
into my garage. Actually, I think it's in my garage. I have one of them in my garage.
No way.
Here's some of my trophies and stuff.
Wow.
There it is. There it is. There it is. Let's see. You remember? Did you go to Japan?
No. No.
That was a cool trophy from Japan.
Super
That
cool.
sa- that samurai one. Let me move this thing. So there it is. Second place, 13 years old. Can you see
Wow.
that?
Yeah, that's awesome.
British Columbia right there, baby.
No way.
1985.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, that was a really unique track for us. Definitely. I remember in practice and I was just absolutely loving the track because I'd never experienced going that fast before. Especially down. Remember, you went down the first straight. It was pretty downhill all the way, and then there was a big
Yeah.
left-hand 180 turn with had all orange crash mats like ski pads because if you went
Yeah.
into the netting and over, you'd fall down a big ravine.
Yeah. I think that's the river. That's obviously still there.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. Yeah, I do remember that.
yeah, because I remember. I think my first moto. I was in a big pile up in the first turn and ended up in the netting, but obviously didn't go over because I'm still here. But
Yeah.
yeah, well, I don't know if you remember him, but Andrew Figlamini was like a huge built Australian guy, and I think he won our age group
Mm.
quite a number of years. Um, in up until maybe when the Wildman won the race in Ontario.
Yeah. Orlando.
Oh, that's sorry, Orlando. Don't know why I said
Yeah.
Ontario. I
Yeah.
think yeah, we'll
Yeah.
go.
I got second to Wildman too at that race. So I got to get a couple seconds as an amateur.
Yeah,
I
and
I mean I don't know how you were, but I remember I mean, not that I'm big by any means now, but I was always like really small. Like back then, I feel like I was one of the smaller guys. Some of
well,
these guys I remember, being 12 or 13, and some of these guys. Well, like Todd Lyons. Like I remember racing Todd Lyons. He had like friggin' chest hair and facial hair, and I was like,
yeah,
man, I don't even have any hair under my armpits yet. And this guy's like a man.
yeah. I was the same. But that's one of the things I wanted to ask you, Brian. But you know, be, before leading up to that point, you've been racing quite a long time. Were you always good from the get-go? Were you always able to like win from right at the start?
I didn't win as much in BMX as I did in mountain bikes. I mean, obviously you saw that. I didn't win that race, and
Yeah, but
Todd
two,
Lyons beat
but
so
second place at the World Championships is still pretty damn good.
yeah, no, it was definitely good. But yeah, I mean, I guess I always did pretty good. Racing bicycles, I always did fairly well. But again, kind of not as good as I did as when I started racing mountain bikes.
And and we'll definitely get onto that stuff in a little bit. But how for racing BMX, like you said, you weren't a big mature guy for your age. I was the same. But how did you manage to compete with those bigger guys? I mean, did you? did you have to work on that stuff? Did you train like quite early on as a kid, like doing sprints and strength training, or were you just naturally fast at pedaling?
I wouldn't say I did any training specifically. I just rode my bike a lot and did a lot of races and, loved going to the local jumps and all that kind of stuff. I would say, it wasn't really until like I guess maybe my sophomore year in high school that I really started like lifting weights. Started getting into that a little bit. And then, probably really didn't start like specifically training for racing until I was like 17 when I first turned pro.
Wow.
I think up until that point, I guess, you could call we could call it training back then, right? We're riding, we're going to the track, we're doing gate starts, we're doing sprinting. I'm lifting weights at school. It was one of my classes is weightlifting. You know, um, I just wasn't calling it training back then, but I guess I was kind of training, but I would say not really kind of focusing and being more diligent about it until I turned pro.
Okay. So you must have just been, naturally super good at pedaling because like you say, I remember when I was kind of 12, 13 in the UK, there was some huge guys in my age class that I'd come out the gate and then they'd just take off. But there was also a few guys that was a bit smaller that were also, really, really strong at pedaling.
Yeah,
Uh, like a good friend of mine, Dylan Clayton. He
yeah, I
was,
remember him.
yeah, he was a couple of years younger than me, and he wasn't a big guy, but he was
Yeah,
always incredible at pedaling and super fast.
yeah.
Um, cool. Well, and so tell me a little bit about how you got on and sponsored by SE, because when we were kids, that was super cool. If that was one of your bike sponsors, was that one of your first major sponsors, or did you have some other cool sponsors before that?
Yeah, I would say that was probably my first, good, cool sponsor. I had like some bike shops and little things like that locally. But actually, Toby Henderson was who got me on SE when he moved over to SE Racing. I think from Hutch maybe,
Yeah.
and he started racing for SE. And I had met Toby before he raced for SE. He actually used to come over and the bike shop team that I raced for. The owner had a little 2-man gate, and we would like go to that guy's house and do gate starts in the driveway. And somehow he linked up with Toby, and Toby came over to help us, with gate starts. And I think I was snapping him out of the gate all the time, and that was kind of how Toby was like, "Oh, this kid's pretty good," and that's how I kind of, I guess, met Toby and formed a bit of a relationship. So when he moved over to SC, I think they were just looking for some younger kids to be on the team, and he recommended me, and that was how I got on.
Awesome. Awesome. And at the time, was that like a super cool brand to you at the time? Like, was that really cool to get onto SE
Oh yeah,
Race?
yeah, I still remember it. Like it's funny. Like I talk about some things I don't remember, but um, I do specifically remember the first time I went to SC because they were like in Long Beach, which is, like 45 minutes north of where I live. I went
Mhm.
there with my dad, met Scott Breithaupt, and he gave us like a tour of the factory, and um, like I remember we had like a shopping cart, and we're just like going down these aisles, and we're like, yeah, we'll take those leathers. Yeah, we'll take that jersey. Got a new bike, and it was like, imagine being, I think I
Yeah.
was 11 or something at the time, and you're like, this is better than Christmas, right? You're like,
Yeah.
I'm getting all this free stuff. Like, this is unbelievable. So
No, yeah,
yeah,
that's
definitely.
so cool. Brilliant. And what was your first bike? Was it a PK Ripper?
Well, it was yes, it was a PK rip. So kind of interesting is, I was right kind of in between the frames that SE made. They made a mini ripper
Hmm.
and they made a PK ripper.
Yeah.
And I was kind of, a little bit big for the mini ripper, but a little bit too small for the PK ripper. And so honestly, I can't remember if the first bike I got was the PK ripper or the mini ripper. But shortly after that, Scott made me a one-off, like in between frame size bike. So
Wow.
it was just like one of one, um, you know, made in Long Beach there at the factory. And I still have that frame today. I don't have the complete bike, but I
Yeah.
still have that frame. And and I know for a fact that it's the only one that they ever made.
Wow.
Um, so
So
that
cool.
bike's, that frame is pretty special. And I know, in the old school world of BMX and especially the collectors, and I have no idea what that frame is worth, but sometimes I see you know, these unique bikes and, a little bit more rare things going for, 10, 20 plus $1,000. And I'm like, God, I wonder what that one of a kind,
Yeah.
special frame is worth, to like the right collector. I have no idea, but who
That's
knows?
cool.
Maybe one day I'll put it up for sale and see.
That'd be cool. And was that like a raw aluminium color or was it black or
um, no, it's aluminum, but it's anodized.
okay.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah. I mean, I'm
cool.
bad with colors, but I think it's like a darker blue anodized.
Wow, no way.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah, and I still have that thing, and yeah, I also have so maybe a year or two into racing on SE, I started racing cruiser,
Yeah.
and they also made me a custom quad angle cruiser, like it was a
No
mini quad
way.
angle cruiser. Yeah, and I was like, it's like an aqua color, and I still have that frame. Also, I think I might have the fork also for that one, but I definitely have the frame, and that one is also super rare.
Oh yeah.
Um, I forget who it was. I went to the Frogtown Classic like a couple years ago with McGrath, and somebody there, I forget who it was, that rode for SE like years after I was on the team. They got one somehow, and we started talking about that frame, and he's like, I'm pretty sure they only made like two or three of those frames ever. And he's like, I wish I had that frame. He goes, I don't know what happened to it, blah blah blah. So I don't know. I have one for sure. There may be one or two more in existence out there, but if there are, I don't think anybody knows where they are. So I got a couple of gems in the
That's
basement.
cool. Awesome. And then, when you were on the SE factory team, did you then, did they then want you to go to all the races all over the country at that age? Is that what happened then?
Yeah, yeah, I did. I started, like up until that point, um, my dad was an electrician growing up, and my mom, she was stay-at-home mom until I got like maybe 12, 13, 14. Then she started, working a bit. But up until that point, I really only went as far east as like Texas or Colorado or something. It was like basically as far east as my parents wanted to drive.
Sure.
And but then when I got on SE, it was like they started flying me to races, and my parents couldn't afford to fly to races.
Yeah.
So I was flying to races. My mom or dad was writing a note that Toby Henderson was my guardian, in case anything had happened to me, that he had, permission to be in charge. And yeah, I was traveling to races with Toby and some of the older kids.
Yeah. Brilliant. So I guess that's where you learned quite a lot of your mischievousness that you lots of BMX kids did.
Well, I mean, you know me, I wasn't that mischievous. So I think if anything from those days, I probably learned what not to do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Some of the guys on the team weren't exactly great role models, and luckily I wasn't um, very easily influenced by any of their bad decisions. So I
Yeah.
would say, if anything, that was maybe
Good
a
lesson.
yeah, a good lesson. Yeah.
Brilliant. And who were some of the who was other than Toby? Who were some of the teammates you had on SE?
I had Rod Beckering was the other pro. There was Bubba Hayes, who Bubba was, I don't know, 3 years older than me, but he was super talented, fast guy, known for running 1 3/8 wheels.
Yeah.
Um, who else? Another guy named Chris Verhagen. Excuse me, Lonnie Tatton. Um, so yeah,
Some pretty cool riders there. And,
yeah.
and talking about 1 3/8, what age did you switch over from 1 3/8? Did you have them quite a long time because you were a smaller guy, or did you move over to bigger, the wider wheels earlier?
Yeah, no, I was on 1 3/8 quite a long time. I don't remember the exact age that I switched over from them, but um, I would say I ran those at, at least until I was 15, maybe
Okay.
16.
Wow.
That's somewhere in that, yeah. Because like when um, well, not that I weigh much more now than I did when I graduated high school, but when I graduated high school, I weighed 159 pounds.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, I think when I was like 14, I only weighed like 115 pounds.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think we were just trying to shave weight.
Yeah. And they definitely roll fast with the 1 3/8 tires on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. It's funny, huh? They were just slightly larger diameter than the standard 20-inch wheel.
Yeah, yeah. What would you say? I mean, obviously now with BMX, you've got the OS wheels, like the 22-inch size wheels. Do you think like 1 3/8 were like 21, or do you think they would have been like 20 and a half or something?
Yeah, I think probably. I mean, I don't know, obviously for sure, but I would say somewhere between 20 and a half and 21, somewhere in that range. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Cool. And then, how many titles as an amateur did you win on the BMX? And then obviously I've seen quite a few videos over the last few years. One of them where you were racing on SE, which you won, and then I've seen the video where you moved up, and I think it was one of your first ever pro races, where you were up against the likes of Greg Hill and the Lumberjack and all the top pros at the time. I think Mike King was in that race, and you managed to smoke them all. Obviously, you had a second place at the Whistler Worlds, a second place in Orlando. So obviously, you were already one of the fastest guys in the world for your age group. But what do you think was your sort of peak in BMX?
Um, I think my peaking in BMX was really um, in the early 90s, really. I think is when I started peaking. And, unfortunately, that was around the time that I started racing mountain bikes. And so, for the first few years, I was doing two sports, right? I was racing BMX and racing mountain bikes because I really didn't know, you know, how the mountain bike thing would pan out. But maybe also because I was peaking and doing really good in BMX at that time, it allowed me to really accelerate and do well in mountain bikes right away. And then, fortunately for me, unfortunate for maybe BMX is the mountain bikes went so well and the pay was um, a lot better than the BMX. So I just naturally progressed over to the mountain bike side and kind of put put the BMX aside. It's one of those, you look back and, you don't think about these things. At least I didn't when I was younger, like all these pivotal moments in your life or in your career or whatever. And I think that was really one of them for me was that transition and how well and how well and how quick it happened over into mountain bikes. It was really a life changer for me,
Yes.
on many levels.
Yeah, of course. And you know, you mentioned earlier that you used to race with McGrath, and then I guess McGrath, sort of did the same thing, but earlier moving into the motorbikes. I mean, I've seen you ride motorbikes, and you're really good on them as well. Was there ever a point where you wanted to go and do motocross like McGrath did, or were you always more into the push bikes, or did you not have the opportunity, I guess, as well?
Um, well, I think a lot of BMXers and mountain bikers, they love motocross and supercross, and it's just you're always going to be a fan, and um, you know, in some ways, I think we kind of aspired to be like that. But it's kind of funny because a lot of motocrossers love riding mountain bikes and going jumping, and so it's great. It's a nice mesh and a nice crossover, and I think a lot of mutual respect. But I never really dove into the motorcycle side that hard. I think part of it was just where I lived and accessibility to tracks and all that kind of stuff. I didn't really have that, and yeah, and I was having fun racing BMX, and had SE and other sponsors, so that was just what I liked, and what seemed to just be the natural progression. And for Jeremy, Jeremy had where he grew up, they had property, like
Yeah.
they had land, right? So I remember the first time I went to Jeremy's house, I might have been 15 or 16, like on a motorcycle, and at that point he hadn't been, I mean, he wasn't anywhere close to what he obviously became to be. Um, but I think, that BMX really helped him, kind of like with what
Yeah.
BMX did for me, right? It helped me progress really quick into the mountain bike thing. It helped him progress really quick into the motorcycle thing. I mean, obviously there's some differences, but there's a lot of similarities. And, I think what I saw as a friend and a spectator, going to the races, specifically Supercross, when Jeremy was just dominating, right? He was like killing everybody all the time, was a lot of that BMX style and influence and smoothness really that he brought over, backsiding every jump,
Yeah.
staying lower than everybody else, all the like fine details and precision that you really need to have on a BMX bike that
Mhm.
traditionally I don't think you needed to have on a motorcycle. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, but he just naturally had those.
Yeah.
And I think, that was definitely one of the reasons that he was that much better than everybody else.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, and same with you, I guess. When you'd done I guess you'd done some motorbike riding when you were younger as well. I take it.
A little bit. Yeah, a
Yeah.
little bit. I always wanted a dirt bike the first, motorcycles that we had were ATCs, the three wheelers. My dad thought those were, he thought dirt bikes were too dangerous. And so
Yeah.
we had ATCs, and we have this place called Glamis that's like three or
Yeah.
so hours away from here. And that's where, we used to go there, and another area a little north of here, about 3 or 4 hours north of here, called Pismo Beach. There's
Yeah.
sand dunes there. And so those were kind of the places that we would go camping as family, ride motorcycles. Um, and it wasn't until I was like, I don't know, 12 or 13 or 14, somewhere in that age group, that my dad actually got me a YZ80. And that
Wow.
was my first like real, proper dirt bike. I had to learn how to use a clutch and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But we didn't go to tracks. We just rode, we just trail rode in the hills and did that.
Mhm.
Um, So yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, I mean, where I was going with that was, I had a motorbike when I was real young, like before I got a BMX bike. I just had a little 50cc Italojet, and my dad used to take me on that on the weekends on some waste ground and stuff, and then like you said, I always wanted a motocross bike when I was kind of a bit older, but my parents didn't want me to have one of those. And then BMX came along, so started doing BMXing when I was kind of 10, 11. But then I kind of quit BMXing when I was 17 and didn't ride bikes till my mid 20s really. Um, but I got a motocross bike and did a couple of years racing just local motocross. But I think that the skills that I learned BMX racing and then the bit of the dirt biking, for when I started mountain biking, that helped me hugely. It was, I had the sort of precision and could jump the bike, the mountain bike, but also I was used to going a little bit faster because of the motocross bike. So, like you were saying, the skills Jeremy had that took into motocross, and I think, BMX is such a good place to start for many different cycling disciplines, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think no matter where you end up on two wheels, starting off on BMX is just like probably the best, first step that you should take, right? Like whether it's road cycling or cyclocross or cross country. I mean, I was bringing up cross country. I mean, some of these cross country racers, younger cross country racers today are amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, like really impressive. And I think, obviously part of that is because they did grow up probably racing BMX or riding BMX. I mean, it seems like more and more there are younger kids growing up on mountain bikes. For instance, like I actually I do a little agent work and I represent this little kid named Elliot Honeycutt. He's 5 years old, and I mean he's one of the most popular Instagram
okay.
bikers on the internet. I mean, if you don't know him, you probably have seen a video of him and just didn't know it's him because he has nearly 1 million followers on Instagram.
Right.
So it's kind of funny, like you look at all the top World Cup racers. I mean, name one. He's got more followers than them, maybe double. You know, I
Unreal.
mean, probably. I don't know for a fact on this, but probably Danny McCaskill and
Yeah.
Fabio Whitmer or something are probably the only guys that probably have more than he has. But anyways, he's 5 years old and he rides a mountain bike. He doesn't even ride a BMX bike. I mean, granted, we're talking 16-inch and 20-inch mountain bikes, but he's a mountain biker, right? Like he's riding down pretty aggressive, gnarly trails for being on that small of a bike and being that little of a kid.
Right.
So I think we are seeing more, talent
Yeah.
maybe starting off on, these little mountain bikes and also now all these like little electric style, you know, stay
Yeah.
six and those style of let's just call them the little motorcycles.
Yeah. Well, you know, just in the recent years and not a long time, it's only just become, you know, accessibility to have a good quality mountain bike with 16-inch or 20-inch wheels. And then obviously
Yeah,
now you don't even need to go to a BMX track because there's so many mountain bike parks with all kinds of flow trails with jumps on. So
yeah,
I guess that, we didn't have any of that. So the BMX track was where you learned your basic skills, jumping and cornering and pedaling. But now,
yeah,
you don't have to do that. There's so many other avenues to go at, isn't there?
yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, bike parks popping up. I mean, pump tracks, are just becoming like swing sets now, right? They're just
Yeah.
popping up everywhere. I mean, I wish there was as many pump tracks as swing sets, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are more and more public parks with pump tracks, which is awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
it's cool to see how many kids are there just rolling around, no matter what they're on.
Yeah.
Just awesome to see those places packed with kids.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Well, just going back onto, where you transition from the BMX to mountain biking. I mean, straight away as soon as you turned pro on the BMX, you started winning. Um, so how long was that? Did you just mainly race in doing all the US National Series, or did you go off and race all the worlds and different championships as pro BMXer?
Oh, as a pro BMXer?
Yeah.
Yeah, BMX. Yeah, so I turned pro in BMX. I was 17 and a half, just kind of on a whim, at a national with my dad. At that point in time, I didn't really have like a major sponsor, and that was kind of what I was looking for, and it didn't seem like it was happening. I don't remember the exact amount of time that had went by without that happening, but so I was at a race, and honestly, I was just kind of getting a little burnt out, and
So
I was like, Dad,
was that like 89
yeah,
sort of? Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
was 18 sorry to interrupt, but in the UK, BMX started declining in numbers and popularity at that point. How was it
Mm.
in your part of the world? Was it a similar thing or was it still thriving?
Mm. No, I don't think so. I actually think it was doing good in those times.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I
thought it
mean,
was.
yeah, I think it was doing good because, like I said, I turned pro just on a whim at a race. Just made a comment to my dad that I was kind of getting over it and sick of racing for trophies and stuff. And
Yeah.
so we turned pro. I almost won my first single A pro race. Um, I had like 2 points going into the third main, and I basically just needed to not get last. And this dude just like I can't remember what place I was in. I don't know, third or fourth place or something. And this dude just like T-boned me and took me out over the turn, and I ended up getting last.
No way.
So I ended up getting second. Um, and I definitely well, I was a bad sport because of that. That guy that T-boned me, I went across the line, and I saw him sitting there on his bike, and I was so pissed. I ghost rode my bike into him, and so I ended up getting disqualified to race the next day. So it was
Wow.
a lesson learned.
But
You know,
why didn't he get in trouble for T-boning you then?
I don't know. Who knows, right? Like I don't know the details, but anyways, regardless, learned my lesson, and but still came away with second place, and I think I made like $800, right? And so
Wow.
when you're used to making a trophy and you make $800 as a 17-year-old kid, you're like, hell yeah, this is
Yeah.
sick. Like
Yeah.
this is like new fire, and yeah, so that was kind of the beginning of racing pro and BMX. And then back then, I don't know how it works now, but back then you had to make once you made a couple $1,000s,
Yeah.
you automatically got moved into the AA pro class. And so I actually made that pretty quick. I think in like 3 races, I made that much money. And then I was on to AA, and like ended up getting sponsored pretty quickly. And
Who was your first
yeah,
sponsor for AAA?
I think it was Elf.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that company, but Elf. Actually, I just posted a video, like, because somebody posted it. I don't know who posted it, like on Facebook or something. I just came across it, and it was, I think it was 1990 grands, and I won. It might have even been 89. It
Yeah.
might have been 89, 89 or 90. I believe it was my first grands as a AA pro, and I won.
That's insane. Yeah.
It was like Yeah, that might have been the video you had brought up earlier with, like, I remember Greg Hill was in there and the lumberjack and Bill,
Is that is
Billy
that where you
Grigg.
you were taking like a step up double into the first turn really well? Was that the one?
That was the video. Like I said, I think I just posted that like within the last couple of weeks.
Yeah,
But yeah, it was a triple step up on the
triple
first. It
step.
was the very first jump. It was the very first jump on the first straightaway, and
Okay.
it was like it was really technical. So if you wheelied onto the first one and then jumped off the middle over the top of the step, it was really hard to catch backside, like good backside.
Yeah.
So really the only way to catch good backside was to jump off the bottom step, but it was quite a big
Oh,
jump to get up there. And and yeah, myself and Billy Griggs were really the only ones that were able to do that.
yeah.
And I mean, if you watch that video on my Instagram, it's like yeah, like I said before, I was by far the smallest guy on the gate in that main event. I mean, some of these guys were 200 plus pounds, and they definitely had more power than me. But that's where you know for once finally the technical skills came into play, and yeah, that was, in my opinion, that's the only reason I really won that race.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, that's how it should be. That's cool. And so obviously winning the your first double A grands, I imagine in the US and for your sponsors is absolutely huge. So what did that do for you then?
I don't know. I think that was just, obviously a confidence booster for sure. I didn't race BMX professionally for that long until I started transitioning over into the mountain bikes. So maybe only like 2 years of racing just BMX as a pro before the mountain bikes came into play, which was, I was on Mongoose then at that time racing BMX for them. And they had a mountain bike team. They had, mainly just a couple cross country riders. But I was able to, they gave me the opportunity to go to a couple races with them and try it out. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I was racing cross country and downhill at the time.
Wow.
And yeah, and I did okay like at the first few races that I went to, not as a pro, just as an amateur.
Yeah.
And they were like, hey, if you want to keep trying this, like, we'll support you. And at that time there was guys like Toby Henderson were already had made that transition and were doing pretty good in mountain bikes, and Dave Coleman was doing really well in it as well. And so I was like, yeah, I should try this some more for next year. So kind of over the off season, like, started riding more and training, a bit more towards mountain bikes. And then yeah, 93 was like, I was like, all right, I'm gonna race pro 93
Wow. So
and give it a try.
93 was the first time. So then were you still racing BMX as well then, or did you just pack the BMX in and do the mountain biking?
No, I raced both. I raced mountain bikes and BMX. Again, like, I didn't know how good I would do in mountain bikes as a pro. It's my first year. Um, and so I was still doing both, right? Like, BMX was what I was getting paid to do. Mountain bikes was like
Your another
just
opportunity.
just an opportunity that Mongoose had given me to try.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it went real well. Like, Big Bear, I remember that year was the first national of the year. And I was more like focused on not on downhilling than and so first downhill race, as a pro, and I got fifth. So
Yeah.
I got on the podium, and I remember I've said this many times in other interviews, but it was memorable for me because John Tomac was big time at that time, and I beat him out. He got sixth at
Yeah.
that race, so I remember like, oh, I must be doing pretty good. I beat Tomac out, like, and so that was the first national of the year, and then the second national of the year I went to, and I won the downhill,
Brilliant.
and so I was like, all right. let's go. And then later that year, I won another national in Michigan. So yeah, I kind of like I did good the first year. And I don't know if it was the first year or the second year. Like I had the opportunity to actually win the national title, which back then wasn't just a 1 day race. It was the whole
Yeah.
series.
Yeah.
Um, but I got like a flat at one of the last races, and but yeah, by year three, 95, I won the downhill national title and the dual slalom national title. And at that in 95, I literally only did like a few BMX races. I was still doing both, but I
Yeah.
only literally did a few. And that was really the last year that I like did much BMX racing at all. And then I was just full on mountain bikes.
And at that time when you were riding, doing more mountain biking, did that affect your BMX? Because when you get used to riding a bigger mountain bike and you jump back on your 20 inch, they feel super squirrely and sketchy. Did you struggle with that at all, or not?
You know what? Not so much. It's funny because I think at that time, and I grew up racing cruiser class too, so I was used to
Yeah.
going back and forth. And I don't know. I don't remember having much problem jumping back and forth. I think it was more a little bit later when I wasn't riding a BMX bike for a number of years,
Yeah.
and then like I think I don't remember the year, but at one point I got inducted into the BMX Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
and it
Awesome.
was in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the Grands, and I was like, well, shoot, if I'm going to go all the way to Tulsa for the Grands, maybe I'll just race Vet Pro, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
I was like, and I can't remember if I had a BMX bike or if, I don't know, whoever I raced for at the time, maybe GT or something made me one.
Yeah.
But anyways, I tried to get back on the BMX bike, and I was like, oh boy, this is sketchy, it
Yeah.
was definitely it was a lot harder, but I don't remember it being super hard back in the beginning.
Cool. And I mean, I've seen some, photos and videos of you on, especially on the slalom bike. Your Mongoose is quite a big, tall, standard-looking mountain bike frame. Um, and then for the downhill, what were you racing on? Was it like one of those amp? Was it a Mongoose amp or something?
Yeah. Yeah, my first I guess downhill bike, which was a full suspension mongoose at the time, was an amp. Yeah.
Okay.
And was amp was its own company
Yeah.
that mongoose, I don't know if they licensed it or if they just had some sort of partnership with Horst Leitner,
Yeah.
who actually still lives in Laguna Beach where I live, and I still run into him. I mean, he's quite old now, but I still run into him from time to time here in Laguna. But I remember they had their factory in the canyon here, and I don't know if you ever remember that amp fork, but it was a it
Yeah.
was a funny fork. It wasn't a traditional telescopic fork,
Yeah.
and I remember I hated that fork. Like I tried to ride it, they wanted me to ride it, I hated it, and I took it off my bike. And then every time I would go by amp in the canyon, like on a ride, and those guys at amp would see the rock shock on my bike, they would be like, what are you doing? How you gonna get that thing off? I was like, I can't run that fork of yours.
No, brilliant. And and then, a couple of years later, so I guess you rode for Mongoose for quite a long time. I remember you had an orange M1 with the Mongoose logos on at one point. So when did that first come about and how did that happen?
I believe 96 was the first year that we started riding intense
Okay.
with mongoose stickers on it. Yeah. I think 96 and 97, 97, 98. So like right in those, 96 to 98 range, I think was when I was riding an intense bike um, with mongoose stickers on it. Yeah. like everybody was back then, riding intense bikes with whatever
Yeah.
stickers on them.
And at that point, because I guess in the early days of mountain biking, there was some pretty good salaries, especially for you guys over there. Had you got a pretty good salary by that point?
Well, I can tell you, I do remember like when I first started racing for Mongoose in BMX, I was making $1,000 a month,
Okay.
plus expenses and bonuses and all that stuff. And then that first year when I was pro in '93 and I did good, they were like, "Hey, you want to race mountain bikes? More mountain bikes next year? We'll pay you $2,000 a month if you want to
Okay.
do it." I was like, "Yeah, all right, let's do it." Like double my salary? Heck yeah! And then again, that happened again, right? And they were like, "Hey, we'll pay you $3,000 a month." I was like, so I don't remember exactly what my salary was when I ended with Mongoose, but it had to be, in the like 40 to $50,000 range,
Okay. Yep.
salary wise. Yeah.
Brilliant. And what did obviously, it was a big company. Did they just agree, did you guys have to ask, could you ride M1s, or was it the team manager's idea? How did that all happen? Because I remember Tomac was riding for Giant and he had an M1. It's pretty mental, really, if you think about it nowadays.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how that happened. I think things were progressing so quickly back then with downhill bikes, and Mongoose was just, they were not focused on selling downhill bikes, and I don't know that any big company really was back then.
No.
Um, I think it even holds true today, right? That there's no company that's really surviving off of selling downhill bikes.
So they just, it was just a tool to get the name, out there. They're still selling the bikes off the name, and you guys winning on the brand, I guess.
Yeah, and we were like, like when Lee and I were on the team together, Lee Donovan,
Yeah.
we were riding, at least at the beginning, we were riding just stock cross country frames or whatever, small cross country frames
Yeah.
for slalom and things like that. Um, so yeah, I think at the time, obviously Intense was a local company to Southern California, and Jeff was obviously very progressive and doing awesome things that were at the forefront of downhill frame suspension
Yeah.
building back then, and then yeah, and just the same as today, everybody is looking for the best equipment that they could have.
Yeah, for sure. And at that point, then, Brian, obviously, you'd won downhill titles, dual slalom titles, and I guess at that point you'd started going to the World Cups. Was downhill like your focus then? Is that what you thought you were going to be focusing mainly on, or was it both dual and at the time dual and downhill?
Yeah, I would say, like at the beginning of my mountain biking, it was more downhill. Um, and then like I had mentioned to you in '95, I won the downhill and dual slalom national title. And then I think in '96 I won the downhill national title again. Just to go back for a second, like those were, like I had mentioned earlier, those were series. Like that was the Norba series. And
Yeah,
so it was pretty, kind of looking back at it again, reflecting on the past, it was pretty cool because, now, not taking away from national titles today, but like guys can, it's kind of like the world, right? Like guys can just win a title. Although
yes,
obviously
won
worlds
the
is
whole
the whole
series.
whole world. The national titles obviously today are just within your nation, but the series, like when I was winning those national titles, I was winning the whole series, and we had some good guys in the series back then that were from around like guys like Jurgen Beneke, for instance.
Yeah,
Like Jurgen was badass from
Yeah.
Germany, and he was gnarly. And like, I remember one year, like, you know, he was like, it was like Mount Snow, Vermont, the final. Like, I was like, okay, you just need to get like eighth or better if Jurgen wins, you know. And like, I think I got like sixth or seventh, and Jurgen won, you know. So it
Yeah.
was like, you know,
Yeah.
it was hard. It was like big competition back then.
Early tracks as
But
well.
yeah, but yeah, I definitely was, I would say at the beginning, more focused on downhill, and actually, you know, doing good in slalom too. But I think I actually was doing better, at least on the national side, in downhill than in dual slalom. You know, like 93 worlds were in Metabier, France, right? And um, like I went there with the hopes of winning downhill. Like
Yeah.
wasn't really, I mean, back then dual slalom wasn't an official title, right? But I ended up winning the dual slalom worlds that year in Metabier, France. Um, and I did, well, I can't remember what place I got, like top 20 in downhill, but that was the year Mike King won, you know. And Mike King, you know, as we all know, probably that story of how much the track changed. And, you know, he was basically like nearly last in qualifying.
And then
You know, it was funny because Mikey was kind of more of the slalom guy then, and I was more the downhill guy then. And
yeah.
I won the slalom, and he won the downhill. You know, but he qualified like nearly last in downhill. And back then, it was a full, you know, the fast guys went at the beginning, and the slow guys went at the end. And you know, the rain stopped, and it just basically became a dry course by the time he actually went. And
Right.
yeah,
So nothing like what happened to Rob Warner in Capron.
what? Tell me that story. I
So
don't know if I remember that
obviously,
one. When
you know,
I know he won, but
so Rob, it was actually before I started, but Rob likes to mention, you know, he was the first uh, rightful GB World Cup winner. Um,
yeah,
and I believe not taking anything away from Rob, but I believe, you know, he qualified maybe in the 40s and then it kind of rained halfway through the race. And after Rob had come down, and yeah, first ever GB World Cup winner.
yeah. I was just taking the piss out of Rob just like recently. He like commented, I like posted something I was riding at Sheep Hills, and he posted like something at Sheep Hills like, oh, I remember going to Sheep back in the day. For some reason, I feel like it looked a lot bigger then. And I go, hey Rob, I just saw you post something on your Instagram about you riding some trails, and I'll tell you what, from what I saw of you riding those trails, you wouldn't make it around Sheep Hills. I'll tell you that. It's
To be honest, he didn't make it round when we came in the late 90s.
yeah,
I don't think honestly don't think I've ever laughed at like I came to Sheep Hills quite a few times when you were there when I used to stay at Steve Pete's house in sort of the late 90s. I'd actually never seen dirt jumps before I went to Sheep Hills because I kind of missed a big chunk of BMX. Um, so I was learning how to do that stuff when Steve was. You know, I remember a really crazy story for me at the time because I was like, you know, I was basically living from day to day on my money to you know just to get by and then to go racing the following season. But I remember they had the 10 pack around the outside, which on your video the other day it looks like that's kind of still there. Is it?
mm,
Or is it different?
is the 10 was the 10 pack, did it
It,
go along a fence?
the 10 pack was like furthest away or so the closest to when you ride in. It was on the left
Yeah,
hand side.
yeah, no, that, yeah, I remember that. That was more near the fence. No, that's not there anymore. That hasn't
Okay.
been there for a long time.
Mhm.
There's definitely some of the lines like from those days when you would come that are not there anymore.
Okay.
Um, at one point there's some, you know, dirt roads, let's call them, that go through there, and it's a wetlands area, right? So as soon as it starts raining here, like that place shuts down, you know, for most of the winter.
Yeah.
But there's like some homeless people and stuff that kind of sometimes go back in these bushes and live and things like that. And so at one point the city was like, hey, you can't have any jumps in these areas. We have to be able to get like paramedics and fire engines and stuff like through these certain roads.
Yeah.
So which was fine. It was nice, nice enough. We were fortunate enough that, you know, that place still exists and they allow it to exist as long as, there's certain rules that everybody kind of adheres by. So,
Yeah. No, it was some of the fondest memories I had from back then because when I was coming there was the likes of you there and Cully and um, I was kind of new to it again, and learning to do that stuff was so fun. And I remember me and Steve were trying to get through that 10 pack, which you could do easy, and you were winding Petey up saying, I think Steve got through it one time, and then you said, "I'll bet you $100 you can't do that again," and then he was like, "Yeah, I can," and and like cased the first one and then had to go back and he kept saying double or quit. And then I can't remember how much money it got up to, but I was like, holy shit, these guys are rich. And flipping, I think it got up to about $800 or a grand, and Steve's like got through the first four and then just choked and ate shit on the last one. So he didn't just lose all his money, he like cut all his arms and his knees, and I thought that was incredible.
yeah, I do remember making some money off of PD on that. Yeah. I didn't remember how much, but yeah, that's awesome. I do remember that.
That that was funny. But then talking about Rob, I remember me and Rob came out one time. I think it was the same time as he flooded Steve's bathroom and refused to clean it up. But I don't think I've ever laughed as much in my life on my bike because there was like the likes of you and Corey Nastasio was doing these giant flips. And the same now. Rob doesn't go riding unless he's got Steve Burr there to take some photos of him. And I think like the smallest line, I can't remember what it was called, it sort of came through the middle. Rob was jumping that on his whatever on his giant whatever bike it was, and Steve was taking pictures, and I was watching all these amazing BMXers and riders, and I think Rob did a one-hander. I don't think I've ever laughed as much in my life. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen. It was good.
Oh man.
But
We'll have to get a reunion going, get all you Brits back out one of these days. And,
that'd be
you
so
know,
good. I'd probably end up like Steve on the floor, but I'll give it a go.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, but yeah,
Dirt
they were some really, really good times. And I guess, that having that place there and the BMX tracks and everything else, that was a big factor on, I think, why you were so good at all the different disciplines.
Yeah, I mean, we had Orange Y BMX there. That was great. Like, definitely, keeping up on the sprinting and the gate starts. And yeah, there was Sheep and a couple other spots, back in the days. I mean, unfortunately, the dirt jump spots, those style of dirt jump spots are kind of becoming, I feel like, less of them.
Yeah,
But like we talked about earlier, there's becoming more of these, public bike parks, and they're fun too. I mean, I went to a couple, over the past couple of months, like where Randy Lawrence lives out in Menifee. There's a really good Velo Solutions pump track, super fun. And they have some dirt jumps
I've seen
right
that.
next to those.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they're pretty good. Like they're pretty fun. They do a really good job of maintaining them, but they're all like public park. Unfortunately, that's like more than an hour drive for me to get to them, so I don't go to
okay.
them that much. I mean, actually only been there twice ever.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, not a whole lot of these like um, uh, dirt jump areas that are just like tucked away in the bushes. That kids are building. They're more like actual you
yeah,
know manufactured built parks, and that's fine. The one that Randy has near his house, like I said, the dirt jumps are actually pretty good size and some decent lines and stuff. But some of them are, if you're trying to excel and be like, hit bigger stuff, there's not too much stuff that's really that challenging, because they're trying to make it safe and everything for everybody, which is fine. And that's kind of like why I personally like the pump tracks better, because like you can get more creative and like you can start pushing yourself to like try different transfers or whatever and things like that.
Yeah, 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 definitely. Um, cool. And then so obviously, you had those few years on Mongoose and riding intense. I remember you doing you were getting definitely getting some top tens at World Cups. I remember on the intense M1 and the downhill. Was it 98 or was it 99 when you then moved over to Cannondale, Volvo Cannondale?
Yeah, 99. Yep.
And so what was the so 98 we had the Worlds in Mont Saint Anne, and it was I remember it being rainy in the finals. You raced downhill there as well, didn't you?
I did. I actually, that was kind of like my last maybe real go for downhill worlds, and I did pretty well. I think I got sixth there.
Yeah, yeah, I remember.
I remember, yeah, like you said, it was wet, and that's always a gnarly course. I was pretty happy with that result back then.
Yeah, for sure. I remember you doing well on the Mongoose there, and I believe you got like a top 10 at Capron as well. I was at that race in Capron. I'm pretty sure you got top 10 there at the World
Yeah,
Cup. If I don't remember wrongly, you guys were on IRC tires, were you that year?
yeah,
And
yeah. On Mongoose that year, yeah,
and did
yeah.
you
The missile,
did you actually have to stick to IRC tires? Obviously nowadays there's a few big teams that are on certain tire brands and they're all blacked out and they use something else. I mean, most tire companies have a good tires anyway now, but I can't imagine the IRC tires that I remember would have been much good in Europe or Montana if it was wet. So did you have
yeah.
different tires?
No, I don't think so. I think I agree with you on everything that you just said for sure. I think I really liked that IRC missile tire that we had back then, and I pretty much just ran it everywhere. I think I ran that. I think I ran that same tire no matter what the conditions were. The only thing that maybe I did different if it was wet is cut some of the knobs out to open it up more. But yeah, it probably wasn't the best, but it was kind of. I feel like that year in '98, I was doing pretty well and downhill on that bike,
Yeah,
and I just remember really just gelling with my whole setup and not swaying too much from that setup. Not changing too many things and
yeah,
just going with it. Felt good, and yeah.
cool. And do you think so? What was the I probably know the answer to this, but I guess you moved over to Volvo Cannondale for budget wise. I guess that was one of the biggest contracts you would have signed back then.
I mean, definitely the biggest contract I signed for like just one lump sum money. Maybe after Cannondale, I probably did better when I started kind of piecing all my own deals together. I was riding GT bikes and Fox suspension and Oakley head to toe,
Yeah,
Shimano. I just had all my own individual deals,
yeah,
Maxis, and whatever they all were.
uh-huh.
And that was kind of my first, I guess you would call it, real stab at self-representing and
Yeah,
trying to manage and put all my own deals together. Because up until that point, I was always just like on a team, and
yeah,
I always had like maybe one or two of my own individual sponsors, like with Oakley or ODI Grips, for instance. I mean, ODI Grips is still my sponsor today, and I had them before I even ever touched a mountain bike. they sponsored me when I raced BMX, so they are absolutely by far my longest, running sponsor
Yeah.
that I've ever had. But yeah, when I went to that program after Volvo Cannondale, it was definitely a lot of managing and hustling, and talking to a lot of people, trying to orchestrate it all and put it all together. And it was fun, and I think that really worked out. And I don't know, I think it gave me a good gave me a good experience for, well, now I'm representing a few riders now, and actually I've always, not always, but for a few years I've helped Ryan Pinkerton,
Yeah.
who's, I'm sure you know who he is. I've always helped, not always, but I've helped him for quite a long time with his training and stuff. And then I've always just helped him with sponsors in general, just trying to get deals. Just I love the kid and the family and everything, and so I've always just um, tried to help them out as much as I could. And then um, last year, after he won the World Cup overall junior title, we just had a lot of teams after him, and so it was a busy few months trying to navigate all that and put all that together for him. And but it worked out great. And really that kind of turned into the position, like I guess where, well, part of the position I'm in now, which is like part-time agent for Wasserman on the bicycle side of things. So, since I have Ryan under my wing, and then I went and I signed this kid, basically Brad Lusky. I don't know if you know Brad Lusky, but he worked for Haro for many years. He's been at Wasserman Agency for well over 20 years.
Okay.
He brought me on. He asked me if I would be interested in helping them and doing this kind of at my own, rate at which I want to put effort into.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I mean, it sounds cool. And, the Wasserman's huge. They have a lot of great resources behind them. So I decided to give it a go. And so, yeah, just really the last 5 or 6 months kind of started building upon that little, as you'll call it, like book of business that I already started with Ryan. I added a BMX racer named Cam Larson. He's a U.S. kid. He
Okay.
was one of the two kids that made the Olympic team for the U.S. this year.
Yeah.
And then, like I told you before, that Elliot Honeycutt kid who's 5, signed him on. So yeah, just kind of starting small, and yeah, hopefully just kind of build upon that. But it's one of those things, like yeah, you can make money off of it, and for sure I would love to make money off of it. But it's also kind of a feel good job, like with Cam, for instance. I mean, from where he was at
Yeah.
this year to the deal that we wrapped up for him already, for the next 4 years through the next Olympics,
Yeah.
is quite significant increase for him, and really is going to provide him some good stability, and the ability just to focus and not have to worry about
Yeah.
where the paycheck's coming in until the next Olympics. And so
Okay.
it was cool to, like, be able to really help him out and get him a good deal.
That's brilliant. Yeah, good job. Well done. And yeah, well, I want to just ask you a bit more about the downhilling, but before we go back to that, did so now because I've heard so many rumors in BMX where BMXers aren't getting paid unless they're getting paid by the national governing bodies and stuff. But so is it possible now to get some decent paid sponsors within the BMX industry, or have you had to go outside of the industry for most of his support?
No, unfortunately, um, at this point, we haven't went outside. I mean, I think that's where the Wasserman Group can really come into play and be a benefit to any talent that is under that umbrella. Is they have a lot of connections. They have a whole field of group of people who are constantly out there, um, you know, talking to the big corporations to see what they want. And basically, a lot of those companies come to Washerman, they might be like, I'm just making this up, but like a Toyota truck might come and go like, hey, we're looking for somebody in whatever, stick and ball sport, or in the music industry, or in the action sports industry. And, somebody who's, whatever, 21 to 25 years old, maybe, a female or a male, or, African American or white, Caucasian, whatever, and they have such a large pool of talent. They can just go like, here's everybody we have, we have
Yeah.
all these, we have all this talent under our umbrella, that kind of fit the profile of what you're looking for. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for, um, for athletes that are under the umbrella. Unfortunately, yet we haven't got anything outside of the industry. But going back to your question, I do think, yes, that it's hard to make, at least, an okay living in BMX, unless you're doing really, really good. And I mean, I think, Cam is doing, pretty good, especially in the U.S. He got second overall in the U.S. BMX championship this year.
Yeah.
I think he was top 5 or 6 in the World Cup series this year. So he's definitely a top 10 kind of world guy, and
Yeah.
so I mean, is he gonna make enough money to retire for the rest of his life in the next few years? No. I just saw. I don't know. You probably don't follow baseball, but my kid is really into baseball, and this one player named Juan Soto, he just signed like a 15-year deal with the New York Mets for like $750 million. I mean,
Yeah.
it's insane, like what some of these other athletes get. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's
he'll do okay. And I mean, he makes enough where, as 20, mid 20-year-old kid, he's
yeah.
he's surviving. And
Cool. That's great to
yeah,
hear. And brilliant. So yeah, just taking it back to going on Volvo Cannondale. Obviously, you jumped off the M1, and at the time, was it the Fulcrum? Was the downhill bike was called that Cannondale had at the time?
I don't remember if the downhill bike that we rode, Cedric and myself and Chasson, Johan Engstrom. I don't know if it actually had a name. I don't think it ever made it to market.
No, but it was a crazy looking bike to me at the time. Obviously, Anne Carroll was winning on it because she was incredible. Cedric was doing well. What was your kind of deal with Volvo Cannondale? Did they want you to focus on the dual World Cup, or did they want you to focus on both?
Well, it started off as both. I mean, because like in '98, I believe in '98, I also won the downhill national title.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was doing both. I was still racing downhill and dual, and then unfortunately, that first year on Cannondale, we just had some equipment issues and things that just weren't up to the quality that we needed to really get the results and perform. And I was pretty frustrated. I felt like I put my off season training, I put in a lot of work, doing the best I could to be prepared for that. And we just had a lot of issues with the downhill bike. And so I kind of had probably, I think since I started racing downhill in '93, like my worst season ever.
Yeah.
And and then in the off season, things were, there was going to be a whole new bike, and things were going to change, and and unfortunately, that didn't really pan out, with having the equipment that I felt we needed. I mean, Chasson, she's a whole other level, right? She was
Yeah.
so good. She was so much more talented, in my opinion, than most of the girls. I mean, obviously, there's other good girls at that time, but I
Yeah.
mean, she was just a one of a kind, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, she probably could have won on anything. Yeah. So honestly, that was so the year two on Cannondale. I was just like, man, I'm over this. This is it's just hard. It's just hard to want to go race downhill when
Yeah.
things aren't from your side are not where they need to be. And
Yeah.
um so I said I just want to focus on racing, you know whatever, I can't remember if it was dual or four cross at the time. But I just want to focus on that.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay. And so that was kind of, honestly, that was kind of the end of my downhill racing trajectory, because I focused on that year. I did really good. I
Yeah. I mean,
won.
you would
I think I,
dominate.
I think I won. I think I won almost. I won every world. I think there was 8 World Cups that year. I think I won all of them except for one. I think I got like third in the other one.
Yeah, you were dominating.
Yeah. So
And were you okay with doing that, or were you sad that you didn't? Because I think you could have made it to be right at the top level in the downhill World Cup if you'd had the right equipment. I don't see why you wouldn't. Is that something that you really were focused and then sad about, or did you just kind of think, well, this is great, I'm getting a good paycheck here to race a discipline that I'm winning at anyway?
yeah, I mean, I think I think I was maybe a little bummed at the beginning, because obviously I'd been doing both and loved racing downhill, but I also loved winning. I mean,
Yeah,
I also loved winning. I didn't like losing. And, you know, I just felt like it was
yeah,
very hard for me to have like the worst year ever on that stuff, on that bike and that equipment,
yeah,
when I knew that wasn't where I should be. I knew, I'm not saying I should be winning everything, but I knew I shouldn't
yeah,
be coming at, in 10th place at Norva races, when
yeah,
from my very first year on, I was always a top 5 guy.
yeah.
And so I was a little bit bummed at the beginning, but then honestly, I was winning so much in the four cross and the dual, like that kind of made up for it. I was really killing it in those
Oh, yeah,
days.
you were
And
absolutely killing it. That's an understatement.
mm,
And um, obviously it was dual first, then it moved into the four cross. Which of those two disciplines did you like the best?
four cross.
Four cross.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, dual slalom was fun. Obviously, I love dual slalom too. But I mean, you remember dual was just it was brutal.
Yeah,
It was roller derby out there. It was
yeah,
it was like trying to get the whole shot and just put some distance between you and the other rider, you just had a target on your back.
yeah, yeah. I mean, for sure, one of the biggest instances, both at Maribor. I remember how brutal Karim Moore was that year when he actually won the race, but he was just kind of wiping everyone out every lap. I remember Sean McCarroll was brutal at one of those races. You were lucky enough most of the time to be able to get out front and clear off, like you said. But if you weren't as fast as you down the first straight, around the first corner, it was pretty brutal for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah, Kareem. I remember one year at Big Bear, Kareem. I mean, I'll never forget this one. He like, I went into the first turn. I got the whole shot. Went into the first turn, and he just and I, you can feel it when somebody's coming, and I felt him coming, and so I just leaned in and braced for it, and he hit me,
yeah.
and he ended up crashing. And as he was crashing, he like grabs my leg, like my inside leg, because I didn't crash. Like I absorbed the hit pretty good and like stayed up, and he grabbed my leg. And I remember like going through the turn, and I'm like with my leg, I'm trying to like his kick him off of me. Like, let go of me. What are you doing? And I mean,
Yeah, it was
Kareem
crazy, wasn't it?
he was not, like obviously that was a long time ago. I don't have any beef with him now or anything like that.
No.
But yeah, he was brutal. I mean, I know Petey got into it with him. He didn't make too many friends, that's for sure.
I remember at Maribor, Eric Carter and Mike Ping were super pissed that one year. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know who the hell was in charge of the races back then, but there was literally not many penalties for people wiping each other out, was there? No, it was crazy. And then
I
so
mean, it's kind of it's kind of fun, right? Like if you think back, like I mean, downhill is awesome. Like we all love downhill, but I mean, it's hard to build like rivalries in downhill, right? Like, and there it was like when you're head to head racing, like there's rivalries and there's contact, and those things like create excitement.
I was saying this to somebody the other day. I mean, now that Warner Brothers have come into the sport, and back in the day when I first started, and you were already doing it. It was over in Europe. It was on Eurosport Live and stuff, which was huge. And I guess that's why they had, the like sponsors like Grundig and Tissot and Volvo Cannon. Volvo was involved with Cannondale, but now they're trying to make a big push on that and make it super TV orientated and spectator wise. I think the best disciplines for those channels have gone now, no matter how cool downhill is to us that ride mountain bikes and understand how fast those guys are going and how good they are. If you're not interested in bikes, you're not really going to watch one person race a bike down a hill, in my opinion. Whereas,
Yeah,
like my wife isn't into bikes at all, but the few races that she's been and watched the four cross race, she thinks that's exciting and likes watching it.
yeah. I mean, I think like you know, obviously not, and I mean this stands true for four cross too. Not every four cross race is exciting, but I mean, same with cross country. Not every cross country race is exciting, but I mean, there's been some pretty exciting cross country races. I mean, look at the Olympics, right? When Pitcock came back and last lap, like I mean, that was friggin' exciting.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And well, let's take it back to you racing again. Um, well, first of all, what would you like? You've won so many things, Brian. What meant the most to you? Would you say is the one thing that meant the most to you, or are they all as valuable as every title that you won? Really?
I mean, obviously they're some of them. I'd say the ones that like stand out the most for me personally are like 2001 Worlds in Vail, Colorado. In '94, I won, the dual slalom Worlds in
Yeah.
Vail, Colorado. But again, it wasn't official. I don't know. I have like at least 3 or 4 of those unofficial world championships. But in 2001, it was dual and it was official
Yeah.
world title, right? And so that year was my official first world title, so that one was memorable, obviously because of that, because it was in the USA, and because it was 9/11 that year, and just all the mayhem that was happening here in our country, and just even getting to the race. Like I was supposed to fly out to that race that morning, and then all the flights got canceled, and had to drive, and all that stuff. So I mean, that one was just from a patriotic standpoint, I think, very memorable one. Hearing your national anthem during that time was awesome. I felt like kind of cool that I could kind of do it for our country kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and then like probably my last world championship title in Scotland there in
yeah,
Fort William. That one was awesome too. It was like, man, it was like, I think people were kind of, starting to write me off a bit because it was literally like, I think a week before I turned 37.
yeah, yeah,
So, I was getting a bit older, and I had, like a really rough semi where I came out of my pedal right out of the start, like I unclipped. And so I was in last, in the semi, and I had to pass, um, man, what was his name? I had to pass a Spanish rider that rode for Specialized.
um, oh yeah, the big guy.
Big guy, yeah.
Oh, Alvarez or something.
Alvarez, yeah, Alvarez, I think, yeah. I had to pass him, and I had to pass Thomas Slavic.
Wow.
I passed both of those guys,
Yeah,
just to make it into the final.
yeah.
And then, I went on into the
That's
final,
it.
and I won the final, which, so for me, that was like a real memorable one, right? Like just kind of overcoming, like, getting a little older and having that bad semi. And then what I always found kind of interesting after that, was the next year. But I believe it was the next year Alvarez won the world championships in four cross, and the year after that Slavic won the world championships.
Yeah. And then
So
Slavic went on a roll for a while there, didn't he? As did I can't remember the first year Michael Prokop come in and he was like really fast straight away. And then
oh
you
yeah.
would have had some good battles with him.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember rightly, and I could be wrong here, but you had quite a lot of because you won so many races. But I sort of remember you always had a bit of bad luck at Fort William, and didn't always win there as much as you did in other places for whatever reason. Um, was that right? Did you have a few bad races at Fort William?
Yeah, and one year I went to the hospital.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
you
like
hurt
tore
your
some
ankle on
ligament.
the first straight or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And obviously at winning a race at Fort William, the crowd was always huge and super supportive. The UK crowd is always amazing there. So yeah, I can imagine winning that race was pretty special. Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
And then tell us a bit. Obviously, congratulations on that era because you were just dominant. But and then when you kind of stopped doing that, then you went and decided to go and do a World Cup cross country eliminator. I mean, that how much training did you have to do and change what you did to do that? Was it a lot, or I mean, obviously
Yeah,
you're so good at pedaling anyway, and you were always super fit and strong. But how did that come around?
yeah, that was a cool one. Like, yeah, so I had been, obviously, like, so after Fort William, after I won the worlds there in 2007, um, I kind of like, I had already like told myself like that was kind of the end of me doing four cross. But I ended up racing a handful of races the next year because I had the jersey, and I
Yeah,
felt like it would be good to just kind of represent it at some races. So I didn't do the whole series in 2008, but yeah, but after that, I literally, stopped racing four cross, and stopped, doing the World Cups. And I kind of saw this upward like trend of trail bikes, being the main, sort of bike being sold. And
yeah,
so, I kind of was like, man, I raced World Cups and really focused on these things my whole life. Like I needed to like take a different direction, kind of do something that's a little bit like, I don't know, more fun, more like my everyday kind of riding would be, and not, not stress out so much on World Cups and just doing that all the time. And so yeah, so I started, I signed with Ibis, and I started racing enduro races, and back then the enduro races were,
On the
were definitely a lot more low key, right? Like they
yeah,
weren't so like high strung and, you know, um, I don't know, just not as serious.
yeah,
And maybe not so much time was having to be devoted to like just like training, like I always did just for cross or whatever.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I took that direction, and then a couple years later, I heard about this new discipline, cross country eliminator, and it's basically for cross, but in a cross country style format. And I always prided myself on being pretty fit and strong, and um, so I was like, man, these races were supposed to be like a minute and a half to 2.5 minutes long, and I
yeah,
was like, I think I could do that, like that seems like could be up my alley. And
yeah,
so they had like so I forget what year it was. They had like some test events like at a couple venues, and I went to a couple of those and tried them out. And I didn't win any, but I think I did okay in some of them. And I was like, and then they like made it official. They made an announcement like that next year there was going to be, I forget how many stops that were, these races were going to happen at World Cup cross country races. And so I was like, I'm in. I'm like, I'm going back. I'm going to racing World Cups again. I was 40 at that time, and I was like, I'm going to train, and like, so I made a course that was like around 2 minutes long, and I'd go there and I'd do intervals and laps, and I brought like different athletes in from around here that I thought were strong and could like help me with my training, whether they were road guys or, I even brought in like Christian Besserine. I don't know if you remember him. He's an Argentinian BMX racer,
oh,
like
well,
really, really good. Like I
yeah,
brought him in one day to like help me. And uh yeah. And so I just trained for those. I went to the first World Cup that they had that next year, which was in Houffalize in Belgium,
yeah,
and which was cool because like it was kind of fun because I'd never been to Belgium, right? I had never been to that area because we didn't have downhill races there,
yeah,
and so I went there, and I remember I got there, and I remember like I landed, and I had like a text message from Todd Wells, and he's like, I hope you've been training for uphills. And I was like, oh shit. Like, all these test events that I did, there was climbs, but none of them were like significant climbs. They were all more like just like kind of
yeah,
rolling hills or short little hills.
uh-huh,
And I was like, oh boy, what am I in for? And they had this, out of the start, and then within like 5 seconds, you're like up a little short, steep climb, across a little traverse, and then up like a really steep climb. And I mean, it wasn't obviously compared to cross country, it wasn't a big long climb, but it was steep, and it was, I don't know, call it 10 seconds long,
yeah,
ish,
yeah,
which, when you're sprinting uphill for 10 seconds, it's hard.
yeah,
And so I was like, whew, well, no, I didn't really, have anything like that in my training course, but
yeah,
uh, long story short is it worked out, and I ended up winning that race. And
yeah.
yeah, so that was kind of cool to like win a World Cup in another discipline, and
Unreal.
add
Yeah,
another one.
unreal, mate. And I don't know exactly what happened after that, but somebody told me that, they the next courses were different again that didn't suit you because the cross country guys were not happy that you come in and smoked them all. But is there any truth in that, or was it not?
I mean, I don't know if there's any truth to that. I think that rumor definitely, I heard that rumor, like I don't know who started it or spread it or whatever, but yeah, I heard that. Whether that's true or not, I don't really know. But the courses did definitely, the next two races that I did, they definitely were a lot different. And uh, I guess there was, it wasn't, they didn't have the rules very polished. Um, you know, you're talking about a race that's relatively short. Obviously, the start is can be important depending on the track.
Yeah.
And you know, this is just one example, but you know, there was no proper starting gate. And I think even today they still have this discipline and they still don't have like a proper starting gate. I
Yeah.
mean, we were in stalls and we were being held underneath the back of your seat by well, the first one I went to, by anybody that you wanted to hold you. And I remember saying to one of the UCI delegates, like, how is
Well,
this fair? Like,
yeah.
yeah, when he lets you go, or if he pushes you a little bit, or like, I'm like, this is fucking lame, you know, like this shouldn't be how it is. And because I think at the first one we actually were like more, we just like had these stalls and we just leaned up against our bars like in the stall, but
Yeah.
the starting gate was like super steep, so it wasn't like you could get that much, right? You would drop down if you got too close to the edge anyways,
Yeah.
so it wasn't like you could really like, you
Cheap.
know, start. Yeah, but anyways, and they were like, you know, whatever, this is how it is, you know, blah blah blah. And then and the next race I went to was kind of the same shit. And it was like the course was like 90% on the pavement. And I was like, yeah, it's cool to go up and down stairs and, you know, but like does this, does this take a lot of mountain bike skill? You know, like,
Yeah.
so I was kind of, I don't know. I did okay at that. I didn't do very good at the second one. But then I did okay at the third one. I think I got third at the third one.
Yeah.
Um, and, which was in France, somewhere in France. But I was just kind of over it. Honestly, I was like, these guys don't have their shit together, for
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
And for two, it didn't seem like it was going in the direction that I had hoped it would go.
Yeah.
And so that was another reason I was over it. Yeah. So I was just like, you know, I kind of at that stage of my life and career, I was like, if it's not fun,
Yeah. What's the
you
point?
know, what's the point of doing it? Like,
Yeah.
um,
Definitely.
but I will say this, it was by far the hardest physical discipline that I've ever done,
Bet.
ever.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, and the reason I say that is because, like, you know, if you're doing a 4 cross race, yeah, you get to the line, you're winded, you know, and you
Yeah.
know,
But you're not.
in a couple minutes, you're probably back, right? Like, you go do a cross country race, and whatever, you can be 10 minutes into it or an hour into it. Like, it
Yeah.
might be hard, but it's like a slow death, right? Like you can
Yeah.
only do so much, right?
Yeah.
When you're racing a race that's a minute and a half long, there's no time to pace yourself.
So,
It's too short to pace yourself. But
yeah.
at
But
the same point,
too
there's
long.
no way. Yeah, it's too long to go 100% the whole time. Like, I don't want to say nobody, but most people can't do 100% effort for a minute and a half long. So it was really, really physically exhausting. And especially like that race in France where I got third, I had a really hard semi. And as you know from slalom races, you know, when you're doing these bracket races, you're racing faster and faster and faster people, and you're having less and less and less recovery time between the heats. So by the time you get to semis and finals, it's no matter what discipline, it's always the hardest.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a really hard semi there in France that took a lot of energy out of me. And then, so by the time the final came, I mean, after the final, I was smoked. Like, I remember I just laid on the concrete for like 15 minutes, like not able to move.
Oh,
Um, so,
yeah. So yeah, that's tough, and especially you weren't 20 then, you were 40. So unfortunately, it doesn't get any easier when you get into your later years, does it? To do that stuff. But so, well, t tell me this. Obviously, so many things have changed in this day and age, and you're still involved in it. if say, you'd come up, you would say you'd gone back to being, early 20s now, and you'd come out of a BMX career. Um, there's not really any four cross that's worth doing now, unfortunately, or dual slalom. Where do you think you would have gone now at that point? Do you think you'd have carried on with BMX? Do you think you'd have gone into downhill? Do you think you'd have gone into enduro? What discipline do you think you would have been interested to do nowadays?
I think downhill. I mean, like I said, I was into downhill and doing pretty decent at it for a while. So I probably would have just I would say probably that. The enduro thing, I don't know. I have mixed feelings on enduro. Like I mean, I think as a discipline to participate in what I would consider my normal sort of riding, I would consider it's enduro riding, right? Like that's what I like to do. I pedal up the hills here, I get to the top, and then I'm looking for fun, more aggressive style trails to ride down,
Yeah,
and I love that style of riding. Um, I just don't know if it's ever going to really become like a big sport as far as like building up stars and heroes and things. It's I kind of my analogy to it is kind of like track and field. I don't I'm not a runner,
yeah,
but when the Olympics come around, like they make superstars out of like the 100-meter guy and the 200-meter guy, and like some of these disciplines, like they're exciting to watch, but like does anybody watch like the marathon races? I mean, unless you're a marathon runner, you probably don't even know who the top 5 marathoners are in the world. But
yeah,
so, I mean, those guys are badasses, and what they do is gnarly. But I don't know any marathon runners. Like I don't know, it's not something I'm like interested in doing, and I kind of feel like that's enduro a little bit, right? Like it's like, yeah, we all and look, there's tons of people who love running. I
yeah,
mean, how many people do the New York Marathon or the Boston Marathon or the LA Marathon? Like,
yeah,
and so I feel like that's kind of enduro. Like most people probably ride enduro, but
yeah,
I don't know. Are they big fans of the sport of enduro? I don't know.
yeah,
And it also turned into, I feel like it also turned into this discipline, which in the beginning was kind of like I was saying earlier, very low key and fun, not super serious, didn't take like a whole lot of specific preparation. And now it's turned into this like people are, flying to wherever the race is going to be, next year because
yeah,
they want to ride all the trails and try to figure out which trails they're going to race on because they only get one practice
yeah,
run for a World Cup. And so they want to have as much advantage as, so now it's turned into this discipline that like literally takes more time and
yeah,
effort than any discipline by far, in my opinion.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I get it for sure. And then, what do you think, being at the top level of most of the disciplines you've done, how do you think, do you like the way BMX has gone now from when you did it? Do you think it's gone in the right direction? I mean, it's incredible what those athletes are doing now. Do you think that, it's gone in the right direction for you, with the high speed tarmac turns, massive jumps, and, it's kind of like, there's not as much slow speed passing as there was in the early days of BMX. Do you think
Yeah.
it's gone in a better direction? And do you think if you'd have been doing BMX now, that would have suited you?
I mean, I like the technical aspect of it. So maybe from that, there's definitely a lot more jumps and rollers and things. So maybe from that aspect, I would have liked it more.
Yeah,
But I don't really 100% like the direction it's gone with all the asphalt turns. And I don't have anything against asphalt turns, but every turn on every track seems like it's asphalt nowadays. And to your point, like the speeds, they don't really slow down. I mean, for the most part, like there's not a whole lot of like power pedaling after maybe even the first jump or the second jump. They do take some cranks out of some turns, but they're like really just to almost like keep that
Momentum.
top speed that they hit going, and it's usually just like a rah, 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 and then they're back coasting again for the whole straightaway.
Yeah.
Um, I'd love to see the speeds like slow down and then speed up. I mean, as you know, if it's hard to make a good pass on somebody when everybody's going that same speed, and it's that slowing down and speeding up that really creates, I think, good passes. It's the same in motocross, and you
Yeah,
know
definitely. And then, how do you think the downhill's gone? Do you like the way the downhill's gone over the years? I mean, that's um, changed as well. Maybe not as much as the BMX, I guess. It's still, you're still riding down a natural mountain at most part, but obviously there's a lot more venues at bike parks, so there is certain sections that are more man-made than there was back in the day.
yeah. I do like some of the faster stuff and some of the man-made stuff. I think is exciting for spectators. I've always thought, like, when they put a big jump in, right?
Yeah,
Like, people want to see that, right? They love to go to that area to watch the big jump, right? And not to say that the downhill courses should be all man-made. I don't think that by any means, but I do think it is pretty cool when they put some of that stuff in. I mean,
yeah,
it's obviously it's the progression of mountains, right? Where most people are going to ride downhill is there's probably more man-made stuff than there is just pure natural raw trails, I think, right? At most bike parks. So I think having a good mix. I do think that, definitely from our days, there isn't as many slow or technical sections. It's pretty wide open, for the most part at a lot of these races. And I know personally, I don't think those sections always look the greatest on TV. But I do think it's part of the sport, and part of riding. Like, they should have some stuff. I mean, kind of like the BMX racing, right? Like, you're going fast, but then you got to slow people down and, like, you know kind of make it an all-around good course. And I mean, that's always hard for any discipline, right? To make the perfect all-around good course. But I
yeah,
think that is one thing I think I'm not a big fan of none of that kind of stuff. And also, them really trying to make all these courses in that, like 3 minute range. I mean, some of them, I think they should just be like whatever and I understand they have to do it for TV. It's part of that is all because of that. But I don't
yeah,
know, kind of takes a little bit of that away, right? Like,
yeah.
you got these long courses. I mean, how long was Caproon back in the day? Like
Long,
7 minutes? I think even longer than that. Like in the early days of Caproon, I think it was really long, right?
I believe so. I didn't do it then, but I believe it. Yeah, it was super long. I think one of the longest races I ever done was possibly Leger when it used to start right at the top off the second ski lift, and then it
Mm,
pissed rain, and it used to go all the way one way and then come back the other way. That was one of the
mm.
longest ones I did. I think maybe 7 minutes or something like that. Yeah, but yeah, interesting. And so, Brian, obviously you're still super interested in the sport and doing it yourself, and you've coached many good riders in motocross and mountain biking. I mean, we could talk about the motocross thing, but we'll sort of skip that. Maybe we'll do another one in the future. It'd be cool because there's so many topics I do want to talk to you about. But um, what do you think? Obviously, in the time that I've done mountain biking and followed it, you're definitely one of the most um, winning and successful mountain bikers that I've ever come across. Who would you say uh, is on a sort of par with you in other disciplines, BMX, downhill, maybe cross country? Who do you look up to and see as amazing athletes that have come and been in the sport?
Well, I mean, Nino's obviously amazing and still killing it into his late 30s. I mean, he's next level. So
Yeah,
definitely admire and think what he's done is awesome. I mean, and obviously Absalom before him in the cross country world, both awesome. And then in the downhill world, obviously Greg is Greg and I we have our own like personal battle. He loves when he beats me, or back in the day when he beat me or I beat him. But I always like to take the piss out of him a little bit because I have a couple more World Cup wins than he has. So yeah, I always like to jab that into him a little bit. But no, I mean everything Greg's done has been amazing, and I mean PD too. Obviously, everything PD's done, and Nico before that. I mean, all his world championships.
yeah,
Just on next level. Rachel Atherton, next level. But I think in current day kind of status, I would say like Bruni. I mean, Bruni's guy's unbelievable, and I think he could be somebody who probably could break a lot of the records. I mean, for downhill, he's gonna
yeah,
probably will at the pace he's going.
yeah. And then, but what do you think? What do you think of some of these new kids that are coming through that I think, like we talked about earlier, they've had like they've grown up with these bike parks and these incredible bikes that everyone's had over the last few years. Like Jackson Goldstone, for instance, such a slight, small guy, but can flipping ride unbelievable on a downhill bike. And then, like Asa Vermette coming through. There's some pretty good young kids coming through now.
I think the difference between nowadays and back in our days is, writers, there's so many more eyeballs on writers now with social media and everything too as well, and everybody just has more information,
Yeah,
and maybe there's more that's expected out of writers, like obviously, like I mean, look at Nico, for instance. Back in the day, like he didn't like really have, not that people hated him or anything, but he just didn't have like a lot of friends around him. He didn't seem to like him and Cedric obviously were like complete opposites, right? Like and imagine if there was like social media back then when Nico was around. Like he probably, I mean, he would have still been amazing, but I don't think he would have got paid nearly as much as Cedric would have got paid back in the day if there was social media. Like yeah, he had way better downer results than Cedric, but Cedric was just way
yeah.
more,
Made for social
way
media.
more. Yeah, and so some of these guys, I think in today's day and age, they might have part of the package, which is the results, or maybe they have part of the package, which is the social side of things. But do they have both? And I mean, I think obviously there are guys like Jackson that do have both, and he's already proved that he could, you know, he can win races. There's no question about that. And aside from that, he's super stylish, and he's got a lot of other things going. But on the flip side of things, I mean, he missed the whole year because he got injured, right? Like, so there's one year, if I look back to my career, I could think of like, oh, I should have, who knows how many more World Cup wins and World Cup titles if I didn't, hurt myself at that one race or hurt myself at that race.
Yeah,
It could be more.
yeah,
And he's just, he just eliminated one full year from, you
yeah.
know, from what he possibly, you know,
Could
could
have had.
have at the end of it.
Yeah, he could have won a bunch of World Cups last this year after the pace he ended finished in 23. Um, but talking
Or
about
or Omri too, right? Like Omri was like on fire, then he gets hurt, then he comes back, he's on fire, then he gets hurt.
yeah,
It's like, as you know, we talked about it. The older you get, the more injuries you have. Like
yeah,
it's
definitely,
hard to come back from those injuries, which was super impressive by Omri this year to come back from his injuries and
yeah,
do as well as he did.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
but
I think Amory is definitely one of them special guys to me that makes the sport exciting. You know, there's always super fast guys, but he's just got that something special to me that makes me want to support him and want him to do well. You know, even though I have no ties with him whatsoever.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and talking about Jackson getting injured. Hardline. What do you think of that? I mean, especially the Medina hardline. I'd have imagined that you'd have loved to have done that when you were younger because you were always amazing at jumping, super brave and fast and calculated.
Yeah, those are. I mean, I've never actually been to one in person, and as you know, like you go to, you can watch something on a video or on TV, and it a lot of times doesn't do it justice. So I'm sure they're a lot gnarlier than the clips that I've seen of them.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I think it's cool. I mean, I've always loved the fact that Red Bull gets behind these unique events. Like
yeah,
they got behind some back in our day too. That we had the opportunity of racing, and
yeah.
it's just it's they're cool. I mean, I like them. I like watching them, and yeah, like seeing the crazy stuff that kids are willing to do these days.
And obviously, like I said, you're. I don't think I've been to many places where you wouldn't hit a jump. At what point and at what age do you think doing hardline is too much? I mean, do you look at it now and think I could hit them jumps still?
Well, again, I haven't actually been to a hardline, so I don't want to say for sure that I would go there and hit that stuff.
But
Especially the drops. Like I think that's the gnarliest thing about Rampage, because I have been to Rampage and looked at every rider's lines. A
yeah,
couple of years ago or a few years ago when I was there, I walked every rider's course, and some of the biggest lines, like the biggest drops. I mean, they're massive. They really are massive,
yeah,
but they also a lot of the times have like the biggest landings.
yeah,
So if you can just like net up and go for them, like they might be easier than some of the more mid-sized stuff where you know you could easily
yeah,
overjump a landing, and so you got to be a bit more precise. I'm probably like you, I've never spent a lot of time doing drops. Those blind drops are
yeah.
are, are a unique kind of you know
Features that those
feature.
tracks have, yeah,
Yeah. So I don't know. I think if they're big, like I see that one, like at the hard line that Dan puts on out
yeah,
there at their place. Like I see like some of those drops as like pretty big, but as long as you just go for them, they're probably they're like high speed, and like you just got to fly out to them. I think I would do that kind of stuff. It's
yeah,
the more like bigger like drops where you got to like
yeah,
hit the landing perfect, and they're like slower speed.
yeah,
I'm not so much into that, but I don't hit a lot of like really big jumps these days just because we don't have that
yeah.
much stuff around here. But I mean, like I go to sheep, I still jump everything at sheep.
Oh yeah, yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, I don't know. I like jumping big stuff, but it's always fun to get the adrenaline going and get a little nervous on something. But I'm also not looking to get hurt or anything. I'm not. I
Yeah,
mean, I ride with Ryan Pinkerton quite a bit. Actually, he's been blowing me up. When are we riding? So I'll have to go here in a minute. But he like when I ride with him, even on our local trails, he is, I'm still pretty fast on our local trails, but like when it starts getting gnarly
Yeah.
and I could just see him like inching away from me because he's like, I'm like, I'm gonna, check up a little bit going into this corner, right? And he's not checking up, so
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's no, that's cool. No, I know. You as well as all the stuff that you've won, and one of the reasons I think you've won all that is I've not met many people that are more competitive than you, Brian, for sure. Whether it's the
well,
jump or winning
thanks,
a race.
Nigel. I mean, some people, a lot of people say that about me, and I don't know. It's a good trait to have in some ways, and not such a great trait to have in other ways. And Paula, my wife, she would, she probably would be a better source to talk to about the traits that are not so good about my competitive nature.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. But anyway, well, as I said, Brian, there's so many other things I'd love to talk to you about, and maybe we could do another one at some point. But I'll let you go now. But I'd just like to say, unbelievable career you've had, as everybody knows. Huge congratulations on that, and I think anybody that you gets to work with you now or is thinking about working with you, I definitely would, recommend it because I think there's so much you've done with your career that you can help with athletes now. So if anyone out there gets the opportunity, I'd say you were one of the best guys to do that with. And yeah, and I'd just like to say, it was a pleasure getting to race with you for a few years back in the day. That was amazing, and also thank you to you. Time when I got hurt in America, and you spent some time that out took out your busy life and took me out in the car and stuff, and really did appreciate that. So thanks very much.
No worries, Nige. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to be on your podcast and all the kind words. Appreciate it. And yeah,
Okay, brilliant, cool. Well, again, thank you, thanks very much for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's an honor to have you on, and I wish you and the family a lovely Christmas.
yeah. Likewise, Nige. Appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you soon.
Hopefully, thanks, mate.
Okay.
Well, I hope everyone enjoyed that. I could have gone on talking about so much more stuff with Brian because he's done so much in sport of BMX and mountain biking, and yeah, an incredible career. Not many people can outdo Brian on race results and racing. So yeah, big thanks to Brian. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. Please like and subscribe if you are listening and watching because that really helps us out, and commenting. And if you're feeling generous, you can buy Maya a coffee, and we really appreciate that. So hopefully get another cool guest on for next week, and have a good week and enjoy. Cheers.